So the Suns lost. How was your trip?
It was good.
Yeah.
Is that it? No other comment?
No comments. No comment from me. So let's just move on to something else.
Okay.
I don't want to talk about that anymore.
It's been a few weeks. I was on a trip and we've been kind of busy, so we were kind of behind because when the last episode came out,
Right.
I think the Suns were losing, and so there's a little bit of a delay. So here we are 2 weeks later, but yeah, we'll just skip that topic. So,
Yeah, we don't need to talk
trip
about
was
it.
good.
That's right.
We went to Myrtle Beach with the family. We went in the ocean, ate a lot of seafood, and then watched the Olympics and ate lots of ice cream.
That's
And
usually
I'm
how it
fat,
goes.
so-
Like just watch
Right?
Olympics and pig out and be like, man, they're amazing athletes. As I
I
eat
know, right?
more.
Yeah. No, we were critiquing. We were like, she could have done better. Eats more ice cream.
Right.
So,
Yeah. Because we're ones
Yeah.
to say and judge on that.
Yeah.
No, that's good. I'm glad you're able to do that trip. As far as me, just been busy, with work, and then we have been, my wife and I have been watching the Olympics as well, enjoying it. And then shout out to those that didn't catch it. If you have the Peacock streaming service, there's a show called Olympic Highlights, and it's hosted by Kevin Hart and Snoop Dogg, and it is really funny. And just hearing them recap sports and analyze sports was really funny. So for anybody that didn't get to check out that show, maybe if you'll be able to find it. But it was pretty funny, just hearing their commentary. So we definitely tuned into that just to kind of get daily highlights of anything we might have missed.
Nice.
So shout out to them.
I didn't
That was
know they did that.
it was a pretty good show. Yeah, it was really funny. Just them working together and then individually, they're both just really funny.
They should do that for future sports, maybe when football starts.
Yeah, they were saying they wanted to work together more, and so I'm definitely a fan of that. I would watch anything if they were commentating it or just narrating it. That'd be awesome.
I need to check that
So
out.
yeah, we watched
I didn't
that.
even know that was on Peacock. I think I have an
Yeah.
account, but I haven't logged in a while.
Yeah, it was really good. So my wife and I definitely enjoyed that and a lot of their humor. So it was pretty funny. And that's pretty much what we've been doing. You know how life gets; it gets pretty busy. So we haven't been able to do a lot of this type of stuff. So sorry for anybody that's been listening. There's been a little bit of a gap, but we're hoping to get back up to speed as things kind of hopefully get in a little more of a groove when it comes to the fall. So
Yeah.
getting geared towards that. And then as we mentioned last week, Cody and I have a trip in September. We're going to be seeing each other, so we're excited about that and hope to be able to put together some content while we're together. It just makes it easier. We do our best with over video and stuff, but it's definitely a different feel when you could just record and do stuff there together. So we're looking forward
Maybe I'll
to
be
that.
able to fit all my stuff because we're really cheap. So we're just doing the overhead bag. So I might be able to fit all my clothes, my laptop, everything, and then maybe some recording equipment in the bag.
see.
So I'll
Yeah.
figure it out.
That'd be nice. If not, maybe I could just bring mine. We'll share. We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And how to get that. So
So it may just be us with our phones. So, but
that'd be it. Hey, as long
Yeah.
as we get something in there.
Yeah.
So, no matter the quality. So, but we're going to go ahead and jump in to what we want to talk about today. That was a rough transition, but here we go. Not very smooth, but a few weeks ago we had talked about, we did a few part series on what to teach your kids about money and how to teach your kids about money. And so a topic that kind of comes from that, Cody, that we kind of thought about is for parents maybe that are interested, okay, I know how to teach my kids about money, but maybe what are some things that I would want to look ahead and maybe want to help out my kids with maybe some future needs. And so I thought that'd be good for us to talk through and then practically, how do you go about that? Whether it's saving or if you want to maybe set something up in an account and invest for your kids for a future date. And so this would probably be, later on, past when they're 18 or, when they're a little bit older. And so, I guess we could start out, Cody, what are some things that you would maybe suggest or maybe that a parent would think about for their kids and want to kind of think ahead and maybe start putting some money aside to meet those needs, down the road? What are some things you would think of with that?
Yeah. So first would be education. And so go
Yeah,
back
that's a
to
big one.
not the last podcast, but the two before that, the part one, part two series we did on teaching your kids about finances. That's education is probably the greatest gift you can give somebody. And so go back to that for that. But as far as setting up, say, accounts and prepping to help them succeed outside of that, I would definitely say things like education as far as funding of it, say high school or college, especially college because it's extremely expensive.
Mm.
Some other things you might could think of would be like if you want to provide their first car, if you want to help pay for their first car.
Mm.
Other things maybe like if you plan to pay for their wedding in the future if they have one, and you may want to prep for that. If senior trips, events, things that experiences you want your kids to have, just things that could come up that might be hard to cash flow. That would be good.
Right.
A good idea to save. And then honestly, just setting them up a nice savings account and just having it when they become an adult. That could be great. Go ahead and starting IRAs or whatever you can to help them set them up for success. So there really is no limit to it. But I would definitely say the go to the basics. Definitely college. I know a lot of people want their kids to go through college, and a lot of people go into debt for college. And so if you could really help them get a head start in their education without having to take in any student loans or very little student loans, you're going to really set them up for success. So I would say that one probably top priority.
Yeah, for sure. And I know, I think those are great things you listed, Cody. And I know each person's maybe mentality is different when it comes to college, and I think that's totally fine. Like I know a lot of people that are very much like, I want to help out my kids as much as possible with college. And then I also know some people that's like, if my kid wants to go to college, maybe I don't want to help out with that. And I want them to kind of feel the weight of that decision on where do you go and what do you study and all those kind of things, or maybe paying your way, working a job through that. Or some are maybe like, maybe I'll do part of it, or maybe I'll help out with something else. So these are all options. We're not saying that you have to do, like, you need to pay for your kid's college. Like, whatever it matches your goals and your values for your kids. These are great ideas that Cody, threw out there of just things you may want to contribute to. So I think college is a big one, at least helping out a little bit if you wanted to. Another thing that, I thought of that I've heard people say is maybe they might want to help out with, a down payment on the first house, because it may be a little bit before somebody could save that money up. So if you want to be a little bit of a blessing and help them, with that, that could be an opportunity as well. And then, great point you made, Cody, just kind of like just starting out, like a lot of us, when we first kind of went out on our own, we just don't have a lot. So a little bit that a parent can contribute can go a long way just to kind of help them start out. So they're not kind of starting from scratch. They have at least a little bit, saved up that they can help with. But I think the car is a great idea too. Helping out with that. And then if a wedding is in the future, that's, expenses are going up for that. So if you're planning on paying or helping pay, for your kid's wedding, that's something you probably want to get started on soon. And so I definitely think, if you notice a trend with the things that we're bringing up, a lot of them are pretty big dollar items. So this is the reason we want to think of these first, and not that, you have to set aside all the money right away. But maybe you do a little bit at a time while the kid's growing up. So that way it's ready by the time, they need it. So it's not like, oh shoot, they're going to college next year and we have nothing, and so then you don't have a choice to help out or not. You just probably won't be able to. So at least have the option to help out, if you wanted to. So I think those are really good options, that you listed. And if somebody chose to do none of them, I think kids would still be fine. But I think it's a little extra stuff you can do, on top of it if you wanted to kind of set your kids up.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, if you could really help, like, as far as say like saving, it's really going to depend on how old your kids are, because we're kind of talking about, having pretty young children, I guess. So you've got maybe 10 to even 18 years that, college could come up, or maybe 20 plus years for that wedding, or 15 for the car, stuff like that. But if you are, say, like Will said, it's coming up next year, strategies may be a bit different. You may be looking at cash flowing, having to stop some other savings to be able to help pay for that. Unfortunately, you may have to look at student loans. And hopefully we'll be talking about debt sometime down the future. So you kind of want to avoid that if you can. But if that's something you have to do, it's something you have to do. And so when it comes to, when we say saving, if they're young, you probably want to start investing. And if you've got that 15 to 18 years there, you could really get some good interest rates going in your favor through nice tax advantaged accounts like a 529, an Utmus. There's a couple of others. And that might be, in my opinion, it's a really good way to get there. So for example, if you say your kid's born and you're thinking, okay, by the time they turn 18, then they'll be able to go to college. So if we just put $100 a month into a investment account through a 529 plan, at an 8% typical interest rate, you could get up to $48,000. Now, if you would just save that $100, you would get up to $21,600. I'm trying to read my handwriting here. And so that's that's less than half if you had just saved the $100 a month versus if you had invested. And that $48,000 actually turns out to be about what college costs right now. Now, the one thing to keep in mind is that college inflation's a bit more than regular inflation. So regular inflation is about 3%, and college inflation is about 8%. So you definitely want to figure out, get an idea, and there's many calculators online of how much college is going to be for your kids. So if you got 5 years down the road, you might want to plug that in and see, just about how much it's going to be. And know that you also don't pull it all out at first. You don't pay for college immediately. You usually pay per semester. So you also may be able to get some more growth in that 4 years. Or you be able to cash flow a little bit. So there's a lot of stuff there. And then there's no shame in not being able to pay for the entire amount. If you were only able to do $50 a month, or your kid's 5 years away from college, then something's better than nothing. And you might be able to get them a head start. You may be able to help pay for their first and second year, and then they pay for the rest, or you both are working together. They're working a part-time job to help pay for it, or you're just able to really help that burden, and you don't have to have as much student loans. Like anything that I just said is a help to your kids. So, don't think that, oh no, I should have started when they were born, and now I can't do anything. There's no interest rates working in my favor. I don't have time in the market. Don't think that way. Anything is better than nothing. Yeah. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I agree. Like, don't feel bad if you can't, cover all of it, but definitely every little bit counts. And I think you made a great point. Like, there's different ways you can pay for these things if you want to do them. You could try to cash flow them, which is basically just saying, let's say, whatever the thing is. I'll change example from college since we've been talking about that one a lot. Let's just say like it's, you want to pay for a wedding. So then you'd have to figure out a way within your year to save that money really quick, to be able to cover, for a wedding. And so for a lot of people, that big of an expense is really difficult to come up with just from your monthly budget of just setting that money aside really quick. And so with that, that's something that we would recommend. It's better than nothing if that's all you can do. But if you want to really contribute a lot to that, you'd want to get started early. And so that's, the reason then it comes into, do you save for it ahead of time, or do you invest in a specific account, for that need? And so I think it really depends on how soon, to Cody's, point that you mentioned. If it's pretty recent, like it's going to come up pretty soon, then saving may be a better option, just so you can at least get as much in there as you can. And then you don't, have any risk that it, the market may, go down, or you lose any money. And then it's, So I think it depends. I don't think it's just across the board of something you should do. I think it really does depend on, um, how soon is this coming up will affect how you're maybe look at paying for it. So that's what I'm saying. Like if it's really close, you're probably gonna have to cash flow it. If it's 1 to 5 years, I mean, look at saving, and then these are kind of variable, but between 5 to 10, definitely look at investing, and then 10 plus is for sure I would recommend
Yeah.
investing it. And so that's just based on, and it depend on how risky of investing you'd want to do, or, if maybe something a little more safe to not lose that money. But to Cody's point, the difference between saving and investing can be quite large. Like over that 18-year span that you mentioned, like that's almost double that you're able to help out just by investing it. And so I think for a lot of times we want to, we maybe want to help out kids, but maybe we don't think through what's the most efficient way to do it. And so we have right intentions, right? We set the money aside, we want to save it. But if we don't put it in the right vehicle, the right account, an investment, then it maybe, we could have gotten more out of it. And so you could have, been a greater help than even you might have noticed with the same amount of effort. I mean, you're set aside the same amount of money. But as Cody mentioned like $50 a month, it's a little bit, it may be a sacrifice for some, but if you do something around that, depends on, again, how much you want to contribute. I know people that do a lot more, maybe like more like 100 or 200 a month, but that maybe not be feasible. Maybe it's $10, maybe it's something like that, just a little bit at a time, but you can set that aside for your kid and see it grow in, I think 18 years is plenty of time, or less, 10 years, to see something really grow and be useful, in that. So that's kind of be what I would say as far as how to get there. And then as far as accounts go, there's a few different, if you wanted to invest, say you're like maybe just had a kid, or your kid's, pretty young, let's say like, 5 or 10, and you want to invest. There's a few different ways you can do it. So I'll kind of generalize, just for the purposes of our conversation here, and not get too in depth. But basically, you've got what's called a 529 plan, and some of you may have heard of this before, or very familiar with it. But that's specifically designed towards education. So most often, what it's used is for college, as far as saving for that. And then you have things called UTMAs and UGMAs, and those each one stand for their own things. And there's always acronyms in finance just to make things more complicated. But basically, those are type of custodial accounts. So basically, it's something where you can set something up that eventually goes to your kid, and you're just kind of custodian over that for a period of time. So really, the main differences between those is how they're treated tax-wise, and then as well, what they can be used to fund, and then, who actually owns it. So there's a little bit of differences between each one. And as I mentioned, a 529 is, used for education. So the great perk of this is if you set money into this account and it grows, and then if it's used for something that's a qualified education expense, and I'll go back to that in a bit, then it's tax-free when the money's purchased. So instead of taking the money out of the account and you've got to pay either, a capital gains or an income tax on that money, the kid might. Instead, if they pay for something with school, it's tax-free. They don't have to pay any tax when they take it from the account and buy, and actually use it. And so that's a really great perk for it. And even too, I've been doing a little bit of research. That list of qualified expenses is actually growing quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
So things like trade schools. So it doesn't have to be just college. Like it doesn't have to be stuff like that. And I think even some programs I saw are allowing you to use it for like K through 12, even education. Yeah. So if you wanted to send your kid to a private school or something like that, that even could be used, depending on, what kind of school it is for that, which is really cool. Like if you wanted to say, hey, we got this money set aside for college, but it might be more effective, for your kid. If maybe college is, isn't the best fit for them. Focus on maybe what you could do in a K through 12 environment. And so that's a really cool function as well. And then I know people that, or I've heard of people, you can kind of figure out what classifies as education. You can kind of say, well, the kid needs this for education. So it does depend on what you can use it. But being able to get it tax free is really cool as far as when they spend it on that. And then as far as custodial accounts, those are more just tax benefits, for how to transfer money. So you don't have to use it on something specific, but there will be taxes involved when that money is taken out of the account. So it's kind of the trade-off, right? Like if you do a 529, if you spend it on education, it's tax-free, but the other accounts, it doesn't have to just be education, but you're going to have to pay taxes. So that's a classic thing with like tax codes, and same thing with when we talk about retirement is, there's usually a trade-off of you can only use it for this or you can't use it until a certain time, but then there's tax benefits that come with it. So It's all about trade-offs. So I think it depends on what you want to use the account for. So say if you want to save for your kid's college, then 529 makes sense, right? But if it's something else other than education, then more a custodial account might be a better idea. Does that make kind of sense what I'm explaining? Like, like it really just depends on what you want to use it for. That kind of helps you make the decision on, where the money should go.
Yeah, I like how you mentioned it's education. So it doesn't necessarily just mean the tuition.
Right.
It can mean the books. It can mean the laptop. It can mean the transportation to get there. Right. It could be the room and board, the food, things like that that help them get that education as well. And so that could be something you could think about. You say maybe, they're going to like a trade school and you think you might be able to cash flow that, but you've got, books, you've got the laptops you're going to need, just all these other things. You could still have a 529 and use those benefits to pay for those things. Or vice versa. You may be able to pay for just the tuition. You may have to cash flow the other stuff like the textbooks, things like that.
Right. Or the kid pays for it, options like that. Like, again, you don't have to cover it all. So yeah, that's definitely an option.
They could go get a job, there's so many things, and there's a lot of scholarships out there as well. So, and if I'm not mistaken, I believe grandparents can also give towards 529s.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of flexibility with that. And who can contribute and stuff like that. It's kind of cool where you can, set up an account and have, I think it has to be certain qualified, relations can contribute to it. But there's definitely opens it up for stuff like that for sure, where you can, help contribute to that.
And then you could change the beneficiary to the next kid if there was some money left over. Or if I'm not mistaken, you can also, if there's like, say, a lump sum of money that's still there and the education's done, your kid's an adult and the money's just in there, then you could just give it to them and then just taxes would be applied to that. But that's still some money that you could give towards your kids.
For sure. So you can still use that money. But if it's not for education, there's going to be taxes associated with that. So it's just the kind of the trade-off with that. And then to the point that you made, which is a really great thing about 529s, is you can transfer who the account is assigned to. And I believe the thing, it just has to be a family member. So you couldn't just pick anybody and transfer a 529. But say an example, if you had a few kids and your first kid you saved up, in your example, Cody, let's say you saved in 40,000, which is buying less and less. So it may not pay for a fully funded college these days. Depends on where you go, what scholarships you get, all those kind of factors play into it. But let's say you saved up 40,000 total from spend, $50 a month for 18 years for the kid. And let's say their college costs 20,000, right? So now you've got 20,000 left sitting in the account. Well, shoot, what do you do? But then if you look at it, okay, maybe I just want to move that down to my second kid if you have another one. So then you can just transfer that to the next kid and now it's for them to use. So it's a really cool perk with that. Or if you want, to your point, if you want to give it, let the kid keep it, they can spend it on, anything extra. But it would just be, taxes associated with that. And so that's another thing to consider I think it'll depend on your parenting style. And again, how much control you want the kids to have, but ownership should also be a big factor. So with 529s, you are the owner of the account. So you can control where the money goes, what's it spent on, and then if you want to transfer who the beneficiary is, you get to make those decisions. Versus some custodial accounts are more based on once the kid becomes an adult, then they are the owner and can use it for whatever they want. So that's a little bit of, a contrast there as well. I know some people that may want to be like, well, I don't, if I got a really rebellious kid, I don't want them blowing all this money that I've like worked really hard. But then other people say, well, that's a great test of if your kid got what you were teaching, giving them the freedom to spend that money, what see fit, and then they spend it how they spend it. That's kind of it. So it depends on which way you want to view it. But I think that's another thing you want to consider, because 529, you're in control. But then with a custodial account, it depends on the state, I believe. But whether it's 18 or 21, once the kid becomes that age, they then are the owner of the account. So it transfers over to them. So that's just another thing you may want to think about, when you're making these decisions, depending on what you value kind of more. And then I had another thought that escaped me. So do you have any thoughts, Cody, before I'll think of it, what I was trying to think of? I had one more thing I was going to mention with those two. I kind of rambled a little bit, so I'll let you give your thoughts on those.
Yeah, I was just going to mention for things outside of education, like what we said, a wedding or a car or just anything that you feel like, you want to give to your kids as they get older. You can open up just a standard account and it will be taxed. You'll have capital gains tax, but you still have growth. Don't think that having taxes is necessarily a bad thing. There's a lot of growth and perks in using a tool like that to save and invest and be able to give them something. And so, if you've got a good amount of time and you're like, you know what, I'm just going to throw a couple bucks into just a mutual fund or an ETF or something like that, just some account with Vanguard or something. And that'll be maybe to their car, maybe to their wedding, maybe it'll be something. I'll just give it to them if they don't get married, something like that. And just give it to it as you can, or a couple bucks here or there, or if you want to do a $50 monthly or something like that, that's going to grow. That's going to grow into a decent amount of money. It's going to be a couple $1,000s, to be a decent chunk of change. And so that would be taxed, but it's still going to be a lot more money than if you had just saved that that $50 and just threw it in an account. So do think about that time in the market. Look at how old your kids are and think, I've got about 10 years. I could get some growth in something and be able to give them something nice. Or you may only have like 5 years and you're like, I may not want to invest it because there's a lot of risk involved. And, 5 years, who knows what the market's going to do. And usually you want about 10, to see that average 8 to 10%. And so you may want to hold off and just save. There's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
Just having something to save or having something to invest to give to them. You don't even have to have a goal of what it is. I'm sure when they get older, there will be a goal. Maybe you don't have enough in the HSA or the health insurance doesn't cover it, and you need to get braces, or they need to get braces, or they need some sort of procedure, or something's going to happen. There's nothing wrong with having just an account that's there to help that out.
Right.
And so that's just something to kind of think about. Is just maybe consider an account that's you just kind of give to it as needed. And then you might be able to give it to them. And if they don't need it, maybe you could give it to them as a gift, when they become an adult.
Yeah, for sure. I think those are, good thoughts. And then, just thinking about the different types of accounts, I think it depends on what your goal is, as you mentioned. And then the other thing is you don't have to do either one. You could do a little, or just one. You could do a little bit in both. So if you want to kind of hedge your bets and say, okay, I'll do a little bit in a 529 and then maybe a little bit in a custodial account, depending on, I don't know if my kid, maybe college isn't the best option for them. And so then, you have a little bit extra you could use for something else. So it doesn't have to be exclusive. I think it just depends on what benefit you want to provide, and then what makes the most sense, for that. So in our example, of college, I would recommend a 529 for that. But for the other things, maybe a custodial account's a better way to go, or some, different, one of the types of custodial accounts. That may be a better option, or just as you mentioned, just setting up an investment account somewhere. And maybe you don't want to move it over to them. Maybe you still want some control over that. So that could be, an option as well. You're going to have the taxes, associated with that. But maybe if that reaches your end goal, that's what you want to, put it into. So I think it really depends on, what benefit you want to provide, and then I'll help you decide, what account is best for you to use and what method, depending on how soon it's coming up. But I think these are definitely helpful things that can help you, be a benefit to your kids. And then as a side note that I'll throw in there, if you're looking at this and you're like, man, I just don't know how I can fit this in my budget. First off, again, it's okay, if you can't do much or at all. Like, giving your kids the love and knowledge and, care that they need, these are kind of extra things that maybe you want to provide. At least in my viewpoint, I don't know about you, Cody, but a lot of things we listed are, extra on top things, unless you've made an obligation saying you're going to do it for them. A lot of things are just kind of extra. So, with that, if you can't do it, I don't think you're a terrible parent, if you can't help out with some of these things, but I think it's a good way to be a blessing. But a quick point, and Cody and I know we, hit the point of saving for retirement, because for most of us, it's going to come. And so I don't, mean to always bring it up, because I know sometimes it can be a boring subject you don't want to talk about. But I would say is I would still prioritize your making sure you're have enough in retirement before you start looking at these things. And I know that may be difficult. You're like, man, is that selfish, right? Like, are you being selfish wanting to, save your 15%, around there for retirement before you start looking at these? And what I'd say is, at least my viewpoint, is I would never want to be a burden to my kids. I always want to be a blessing. So for me, if I don't have enough saved in retirement, and let's say, I'm running out of money and I become a burden on them, I would hate for that to have to happen. So I would rather make sure that's taken care of. And then once that's taken care of, then I can focus on, okay, how can I be a blessing? And even then, if it's not financially, I can focus on being a blessing in other ways, like giving of my time or knowledge or whatever to them. And I can make sure I'm not being a burden on them when I get older. I don't know if you disagree or agree with that, Cody, but that's at least how I would think of, like, get your 15% in retirement. I know we talk about it a lot, but it's important. Most of us are going to see retirement age, and I don't want to be a burden on those that I love when it comes to that. And then once you've got that and you've got a little extra margin in your budget, then you can throw some money, as we mentioned, however little or much you want to do, into these extra things for your kids. So I don't know. What do you think, Cody?
No, that's a great point. I mean, first you want to educate your kids. Top priority. You want to give them, like you said, you don't want to be a burden. You want to be a blessing. And so I think, giving them that education of how to handle finances, even if you don't provide any of that, finances, but you provide the education, that's going to set them up. And then making sure you're not a burden. That's a really good point. That they may not see it as a gift, but it's going to become a gift and not being a burden to them. And it's not, your children aren't your retirement. That's your responsibility, is to take care of your retirement.
Right.
And so that's a really good point, is to try not to be a burden. And we don't mean that by like them not helping you as you get older, or, being around, but
right.
Exactly.
I mean, like not having to help financially, that becomes a stressor for them, is providing for you financially.
Absolutely. Because then they're going to have kids of their own, and they're going to be having the same kind of question about their kids that you're having right now about them. So I would say definitely the main priority is educate them about finances. Make sure that you're covered and that you don't hope that they're your retirement. And then if there's extra in that margin, then you could start seeing what way you could bless them with some money or some funds that could help them as they become an adult. But don't think that you're a bad parent because you don't have a 529 plan or you can't afford it. That's not what defines a good parent. A good parent is education and making sure that you're taking care of yourself. So one day you're not burdening your children.
Yeah. There's so many other ways other than money to be a blessing to your kids. Like just love them, just give them all you've got, your love and care. And I think that's enough. So, don't feel bad if money isn't a part of it, but this is a good option. I think what we've talked through today, giving you some options is of how money could play a part in you maybe passing some things on to them. But there's a lot more than just money. That's just what Cody and I focus on because that's kind of what all of our podcasts and materials are on. But don't feel like that's the only way.
Yeah, that's really good. If you guys have any questions, please hit us up on our website, www.willandcody.com. And we'll answer your questions there. If you got anything about, want to learn any more about 529 plans, or maybe you've got an idea or you got a budget you want us to look at, maybe you can say, hey, I'm thinking about this for my kids, but I don't know if this is the right time. We'd be happy to look at it, give you our opinion about it. But anyway, guys, we really appreciate you listening, and we'll see you next time.
See you guys.